Sophia Reyes couldn't feel her toes anymore. 6 hours of standing in these borrowed shoes that pinched just a bit too tight would do that to anyone. She adjusted the black bow tie of her server's uniform for what felt like the 100th time that evening, and checked her watch. Just 2 more hours to go. The kitchen of Harper Hill Estate buzzed with activity as the catering team prepared for the final dessert service. Trays of tiny cakes and fruit tarts lined the steel counters, while the head chef barked orders at anyone who dared move too slowly. Sophia kept her head down and focused on arranging chocolate-dipped strawberries in perfect spirals, just as she'd been shown. "Not like that," snapped Mrs. Chen, the catering manager. "The stems need to point inward." "Start over." Sophia nodded without argument. This job paid twice what she made at the coffee shop near campus, and she desperately needed every dollar for next semester's textbooks. At 19, Sophia lived in 2 different worlds. During the day, she attended the local community college on a partial scholarship, studying business with dreams of someday starting her own small bakery. By night and weekend, she worked whatever job she could find to cover the rest of her expenses. Her mother's disability checks barely covered their tiny apartment's rent, leaving Sophia to handle everything else. "Where's that pianist?" Mrs. Chen suddenly demanded, her face flushed with stress as she burst back through the kitchen doors. "Has anyone seen him arrive yet?" The kitchen staff exchanged glances but remained silent. Sophia kept her eyes on her task, carefully positioning another strawberry. Mrs. Chen's phone rang, and she stepped away to answer it. Even from across the kitchen, Sophia could hear the woman's voice rising in panic. "What do you mean you can't make it? The event starts in an hour. I don't care about your other commitment, we had a contract." When she hung up, Mrs. Chen looked like she might either scream or cry. "The pianist just canceled," she announced to the room. "Something about a better-paying gig across town. The Harpers are going to kill me. This whole charity gala was built around the music program." Sophia bit her lip, continuing to arrange strawberries while an idea took root in her mind. Normally she would never speak up, especially not to suggest something to someone like Mrs. Chen, but desperate times called for desperate measures, and Mrs. Chen certainly looked desperate. Mrs. Chen?" Sophia's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "What is it, girl? I'm in the middle of a crisis here." Sophia cleared her throat and tried again. "I might know someone who plays piano. Really well, actually." Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed. "Is this person professional? Available tonight? And willing to play for 3 hours at an elite charity event?" Sophia hesitated. She hadn't spoken to Ethan Mercer in years, not since her childhood friend Lily, Ethan's sister, had moved away after high school. Back then, Ethan had been a college student with an extraordinary talent for the piano. Now, according to what she occasionally saw in the news, he was the 30-year-old founder and CEO of Mercer Tech, a company worth billions. "He's very good," Sophia said carefully. "I used to know his family. I could try reaching out." Mrs. Chen looked Sophia up and down as if seeing her for the first time. "You know someone rich enough to attend this gala as a guest, yet you're serving appetizers for minimum wage plus tips?" Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "We're not close anymore, but he used to love playing piano more than anything. Before his company took off, I mean." Mrs. Chen checked her watch and sighed dramatically. "We have exactly 57 minutes to find a replacement. Make your call, but if this falls through, you're on strawberry duty for the rest of the night while I figure out how to save my business." Sophia nodded and quickly wiped her hands on a towel before stepping into the quiet corridor outside the kitchen. Her heart pounded as she pulled out her phone. She didn't have Ethan's number anymore, why would she? But she remembered his sister Lily mentioning that he was active on social media for business purposes. After a quick search, Sophia found Ethan's profile. His most recent post was about a tech conference in Tokyo he had attended just last week. The profile picture showed a serious-looking man in an expensive suit, nothing like the music-obsessed boy she remembered, who would play for hours in the Mercer family living room while Sophia and Lily did homework. Sophia's finger hovered over the message button. What were the chances a billionaire tech CEO would even see her message, let alone agree to play piano at a charity event with zero notice? But she thought of Mrs. Chen's panicked face and pressed send before she could change her mind. "Hi, Ethan, this is Sophia Reyes, Lily's old friend from high school. I'm working at a charity gala tonight at Harper Hill Estate and our pianist just canceled. I remembered how amazing you were at piano and thought maybe, if by some miracle you're free and willing, you might be able to help out. I know it's completely out of the blue after all these years. Sorry to bother you. Sophia stared at the message after sending it, already regretting the impulsive decision. Someone like Ethan probably got hundreds of messages a day. He'd never see it, or if he did, he'd ignore it. What had she been thinking? She was about to put her phone away when it suddenly buzzed with a notification. Ethan Mercer had seen her message. Then, incredibly, 3 dots appeared indicating he was typing a response. Sophia held her breath. Sophia. That's a name I haven't heard in years. Video call? Sophia glanced down at her server's uniform and winced. But beggars couldn't be choosers. She quickly adjusted her hair and accepted the call. When Ethan's face appeared on the screen, Sophia barely recognized him. The shaggy-haired boy who used to wear faded band t-shirts had transformed into a man with sharp features, carefully styled dark hair, and eyes that seemed to calculate everything they saw. He wore a crisp white shirt, and Sophia could see an impressive city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. Sophia Reyes, he said, his voice deeper than she remembered. It's been what, 6 years? 7, she corrected automatically. Since Lily moved away for college. A flicker of something, recognition, perhaps nostalgia, crossed his face. And you're working as a server now? Sophia fought the urge to apologize for her circumstances. Part-time. I'm studying business at Westlake Community. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. Tell me about this gala. Why did the pianist cancel? Better offer elsewhere, I guess. It's a charity event for children's music education. The guests are expecting 3 hours of classical piano during dinner and mingling. The organizer is panicking because music is supposed to be the whole theme of the night. Ethan was quiet for a moment, studying her through the screen. And you thought of me? I remembered how you used to play for hours in your living room. Lily said you were good enough for Juilliard before you chose computer science instead. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. I haven't played seriously in years, Sophia. But you could, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. You were the most talented person I'd ever heard. Why are you really asking me? Ethan asked suddenly, his gaze intense. There must be professional musicians you could call. Sophia hesitated, then decided on honesty. Because I remember how much joy it brought you. Before business consumed your life. The way you played, it was like nothing else mattered. And sometimes I see your face in business magazines or online, and you never look like that anymore. The silence that followed was so long that Sophia thought she'd made a terrible mistake. She'd overstepped, been too personal with someone who was practically a stranger now. What's the address again? Ethan finally asked, his voice softer. Harper Hill Estate, Sophia said, hardly daring to hope. The gala starts at 7. Ethan checked his watch. A sleek, expensive-looking timepiece that probably cost more than Sophia's entire semester of tuition. I have a meeting I need to end first, but I can be there by 7:30. Sophia couldn't believe what she was hearing. Really? You'll do it? On one condition, Ethan said, the businessman returning to his voice. When you introduce me, don't mention Mercer Tech or my company. Don't introduce me as a CEO or entrepreneur. Just say I'm an old friend who loves music. Sophia nodded quickly. Of course. Whatever you want. I'll see you soon then, Ethan said, and ended the call before Sophia could thank him properly. Sophia stood frozen in the hallway, her phone still in her hand, trying to process what had just happened. Had Ethan Mercer, tech billionaire and one of the most successful young entrepreneurs in the country, really just agreed to fill in as a pianist for a charity gala on her request? When she returned to the kitchen, Mrs. Chen pounced immediately. Well, did your mystery pianist agree? He'll be here by 7:30, Sophia said, still dazed. Mrs. Chen narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Who exactly is this person, Sophia? I need to know what we're dealing with here. Sophia remembered Ethan's condition and chose her words carefully. He's an old family friend. He's very talented, I promise. He studied piano for years. This better not be some amateur who's going to embarrass me in front of the Harpers, Mrs. Chen warned. These people can make or break my business. He won't embarrass anyone, Sophia said with more confidence than she felt. What if Ethan had lost his touch? What if he didn't show up at all? As she returned to arranging strawberries, Sophia tried to calm her racing thoughts. In just a few hours, worlds would collide. Her world of borrowed shoes and minimum wage, and Ethan's world of private jets and billion-dollar deals. And somehow she'd be the bridge between them. She just hoped she hadn't made the biggest mistake of her life. Sophia spent the next hour in a state of nervous anticipation. Every time the kitchen doors swung open, she looked up, expecting to see Ethan. But as 7:30 approached and then passed with no sign of him, doubt began to creep in. "Where is this piano genius of yours?" Mrs. Chen hissed as she rushed past with a tray of champagne flutes. "The Harpers are already asking about the music." "He'll be here," Sophia insisted, though her confidence was fading. Why had she believed Ethan would actually show up? People like him made promises to people like her all the time without intending to keep them. At 7:45, Mrs. Chen pulled Sophia aside, her expression thunderous. "I took a chance on you and now I look like a fool. If your friend doesn't walk through that door in the next 5 minutes, don't bother showing up for the Henderson wedding next weekend." Sophia nodded miserably. She needed that job. With tuition payments coming due, losing even one catering gig would mean skipping meals for a week. At 7:48, a commotion near the front entrance caught everyone's attention. Sophia hurried to peek through the kitchen doors and felt her heart skip. There, handing his coat to the attendant, stood Ethan Mercer. He wore a tailored black suit that probably cost more than her entire year's wages, but unlike the stiff, serious man from their video call, something about him now seemed almost nervous. Sophia smoothed down her uniform and pushed through the doors before Mrs. Chen could stop her. As she approached Ethan, she noticed several guests doing double takes, clearly recognizing the young tech mogul. "You came," Sophia said, unable to hide her relief. Ethan turned, and for a moment, she caught a glimpse of the boy she remembered, a flash of warmth in those calculating eyes. "I said I would." "I know, but—" Sophia stopped herself. "Thank you. Really." He glanced around the opulent ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and flower arrangements that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly rent. "Where's the piano?" Sophia led him through the crowd, acutely aware of the contrast between them. Her in her server's uniform, him in his perfect suit. People whispered as they passed. She caught fragments. "Isn't that Ethan Mercer? The Mercer Tech founder? What's he doing with the help?" The grand piano sat on a small raised platform at the far end of the ballroom. It was a beautiful instrument, sleek and black, waiting silently for someone to bring it to life. "I haven't played in public for years," Ethan said quietly as they approached it. "Not since college." Sophia looked at him in surprise. "But you were so good. I got busy. Building a company takes time." There was something in his voice, regret perhaps, that made Sophia forget their different worlds for a moment. "Do you miss it?" Ethan ran his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them, a gesture so gentle it seemed almost reverent. "I don't let myself think about it." Before Sophia could respond, Mrs. Chen appeared at her side, slightly out of breath. "Is this him? Your pianist?" Ethan turned, his expression instantly transforming into the polite mask of a businessman. He extended his hand. "Ethan, I understand you need someone to play tonight." Mrs. Chen's eyes widened as recognition dawned. "You're an old friend of Sophia's," Ethan interrupted smoothly, with a pointed glance at Sophia. "Who happens to play piano?" Mrs. Chen looked between them, clearly confused by the connection between her minimum wage server and one of the country's most successful young entrepreneurs. "Well, Mr. Ethan, we're so grateful you could help us out. The guests are expecting about 3 hours of classical pieces, but if that's too long..." "It's fine," Ethan said. "I should probably warm up, though." "Of course." Mrs. Chen nodded enthusiastically before turning to Sophia. "Introduce him in 5 minutes, then get back to serving. The chocolate fountains need refilling." After she hurried away, Sophia turned to Ethan apologetically. "Sorry about that. I should have warned you that I'd have to introduce you." "It's fine," Ethan said again, sitting at the piano bench and adjusting it to his height. "Just remember what I asked," Sophia nodded. "No mention of Mercer Tech or your company. Just an old friend who loves music." Something like gratitude flickered across Ethan's face. He placed his hands on the keys and played a quick scale, then a chord progression that made Sophia's breath catch. Even that simple warm-up sounded beautiful. "You still play amazingly," she said. "Muscle memory," Ethan replied, but there was a small, pleased smile on his lips. "Go on, make your introduction." "Your boss is giving us the evil eye." Sophia stepped up to the microphone that had been set up beside the piano, her heart pounding. She'd never spoken in front of wealthy, important people before. The ballroom quieted as she tapped the microphone. Good evening, she began, her voice shaking slightly. Thank you all for coming to support the Children's Music Foundation tonight. We're honored to have with us a very special performer. She glanced at Ethan, who watched her intently. Many years ago, I was fortunate enough to know someone who played piano with more passion and skill than anyone I'd ever heard. Life took us in different directions, but by some miracle, he agreed to share his gift with us tonight. She swallowed. Please welcome my old friend Ethan, who loves music. A polite applause rippled through the crowd as Sophia stepped away from the microphone. As she passed Ethan, he caught her wrist gently. Thank you, he said softly, then released her and turned to the piano. Sophia should have returned to the kitchen immediately, but something made her linger by the wall, wanting to hear at least the beginning of Ethan's performance. For a moment, he sat motionless at the piano, hands hovering above the keys. The ballroom fell completely silent. Then Ethan began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room, so achingly beautiful that Sophia felt tears spring to her eyes. Ethan's fingers moved across the keys with impossible grace, coaxing sounds from the instrument that seemed almost alive. This wasn't the playing of someone who got busy and forgot about music. This was the playing of someone who carried it inside them always, even when they pretended not to. Sophia watched, transfixed, as Ethan's face transformed. Gone was the stern CEO, the calculating businessman. In his place was a young man lost in the pure joy of creation. His eyes closed as he swayed slightly with the music, a small smile playing on his lips. The guests, who had been chatting and mingling moments before, now stood in rapt attention. Even the servers had paused in their duties, trays balanced carefully as they listened. When the piece ended, there was a moment of breathless silence before thunderous applause erupted. Ethan opened his eyes, looking almost surprised to find himself in a crowded ballroom rather than alone with his music. Sophia felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to find Mrs. Chen, her expression softer than Sophia had ever seen it. Where on earth did you find him? Mrs. Chen whispered. He's magnificent. I told you, Sophia said. He's an old friend. Well, your old friend just saved this event, and possibly my business. Mrs. Chen pressed a stack of cocktail napkins into Sophia's hands. Now get back to work. Those chocolate fountains won't refill themselves. For the next hour, Sophia moved through the ballroom serving drinks and hors d'oeuvres, always with one ear attuned to Ethan's playing. He moved seamlessly from Chopin to Debussy to Beethoven, each piece more captivating than the last. Occasionally, their eyes would meet across the room, and Sophia would offer an encouraging smile that Ethan sometimes returned before losing himself in the music again. During a brief pause between pieces, Sophia was arranging strawberries around a chocolate fountain when she overheard two elegantly dressed women talking nearby. That's Ethan Mercer playing, you know, one whispered. The Mercer Tech founder. I know who he is, the other replied. What I don't understand is why he's playing piano at a charity gala instead of writing a check. Maybe he's trying to impress someone. My husband says since his company went public, he's become quite the celebrity in tech circles. Well, I never would have guessed he was this talented. He always seems so cold in interviews. Sophia moved away, not wanting to eavesdrop further, but their words stayed with her. Did everyone see Ethan that way? Cold, calculating, defined only by his business success? Did Ethan see himself that way now? As the evening progressed, Sophia noticed something strange happening. Ethan's playing became more personal, more emotional, as if with each piece he was remembering something he'd forced himself to forget. And the audience responded, drawing closer to the piano, their conversations dying away as they simply listened. Mrs. Harper herself, the elegant hostess of the evening, stood near the piano with tears in her eyes during Ethan's rendition of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. When Ethan finally took a break after nearly 2 hours of continuous playing, Sophia was instructed to bring him water and make sure he had everything he needed. She approached cautiously, not wanting to intrude on his moment of rest. The guests are loving your performance, she said, offering him a glass of water. Mrs. Chen says donation pledges have doubled since you started playing. Ethan took the water gratefully, his fingers slightly trembling, the only sign of the exertion of his marathon performance. I forgot, he said quietly. Forgot what? What it feels like. He looked up at her and Sophia was startled by the emotion in his eyes. To lose yourself in something that isn't about profit margins or market share. For a brief moment, they were just two people sharing an honest connection. Not a server and a billionaire, not a community college student and a tech mogul, but simply Sophia and Ethan. Then Mrs. Chen appeared, breaking the spell. "Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Harper would like to speak with you when you have a moment. She's very impressed with your playing." Ethan's expression shifted, the mask of the businessman sliding back into place. "Of course." As he stood to join the party's hostess, he glanced back at Sophia. "Thank you," he said, "for remembering who I used to be." Sophia watched as Ethan moved through the crowd toward Mrs. Harper. Even from a distance, she could see the transformation happening, his shoulders straightening, his smile becoming practiced and professional rather than the genuine one she'd glimpsed moments ago. By the time he reached the event's hostess, he was fully the billionaire tech CEO again, shaking hands confidently as people clustered around him. "Back to work, Sophia." Mrs. Chen clapped her hands as she passed. "The dessert table needs attention." For the next half hour, Sophia busied herself with serving and cleaning, stealing glances toward Ethan whenever possible. He was now surrounded by a group of men in expensive suits and women dripping with jewelry, all of them laughing a bit too loudly at something he'd said. Sophia recognized the familiar dance of people trying to impress someone important. What struck her most was how uncomfortable Ethan looked, despite his polished smile. His eyes kept drifting back to the piano, as if he'd rather be there than networking with the elite. As Sophia collected empty glasses from a table, she overheard a conversation that made her pause. "Mercer's been making some interesting moves lately," a gray-haired man was saying. "That acquisition in Singapore last month surprised everyone." "His board must be loving the stock price," another man replied. "Though I heard rumors he's been pushing back on the new advertising platform. Something about privacy concerns. Always the idealist," the first man laughed. "He'll learn eventually that business is business. You can't let personal feelings interfere with profit." Sophia moved away, their words echoing in her mind. Was that why Ethan had stopped playing? Because he'd learned that personal passions had no place in the world of business? When Ethan finally returned to the piano, there was a subtle tension in his posture that hadn't been there before. He sat down, adjusted his cuffs, and began to play again, but something had changed. The technical skill was still impeccable, but the emotional depth of his earlier performance had diminished. It was as if the businessman had reasserted control over the artist. Sophia felt a strange disappointment watching him. She finished her duties quickly and slipped out to the mansion's terrace for a brief break. The night air was cool against her skin, a welcome relief from the stuffy ballroom. Hiding too? Sophia jumped at the voice, turning to find Ethan standing in the shadows. He'd loosened his tie slightly, and there was a weariness in his face that hadn't been visible from across the ballroom. "I thought you were playing," she said. "I told them I needed a 5-minute break." Ethan leaned against the stone balustrade, looking out at the carefully manicured gardens below. They immediately started discussing business opportunities. "Apparently I can't just be a pianist tonight." Sophia joined him at the railing, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Must be exhausting always being Ethan Mercer, tech genius." He glanced at her, surprised. "Most people don't see it that way. They think it's all private jets and fancy parties." "Is it?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But mostly it's endless meetings, constant decisions, and the weight of knowing thousands of people depend on those decisions being right." He ran a hand through his hair, messing up its perfect styling. "I haven't slept more than 4 hours a night in years." Sophia studied him in the dim light from the mansion windows. "Why did you agree to come tonight? You must get asked to attend charity events all the time." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Your message mentioned Lily. It made me think of before. Everything." "You mean before you became famous?" "Before I became defined by what I do instead of who I am." He turned to look at her directly. "When you introduced me tonight, you didn't say Ethan Mercer, CEO of Mercer Tech. You said Ethan who loves music. No one has thought of me that way in a very long time." "Not even me." Sophia didn't know how to respond to such honesty. This powerful man was suddenly revealing vulnerabilities she never expected him to have. "What about you?" Ethan asked, changing the subject. "Still friends with Lily?" Sophia shook her head. "We lost touch after she moved. I see her posts online sometimes, but we live in different worlds now." "Like us," Ethan said softly. "Like us," Sophia agreed. Except here we are, somehow in the same place again. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the faint music from inside and the distant sound of fountain water splashing in the garden below. "I should get back," Ethan finally said, straightening his tie, "and you probably have work to do." "Always," Sophia smiled. "But for what it's worth, I still think of you as the boy who loves music. Even if he got a little lost along the way." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes, gratitude perhaps, or recognition. He hesitated, as if wanting to say more, then simply nodded and turned back toward the ballroom doors. Sophia remained on the terrace a moment longer, trying to process the strange connection that seemed to be forming between them, despite their vastly different lives. Then, remembering Mrs. Chen's warnings about breaks, she hurried back inside. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of serving, cleaning, and stolen moments listening to Ethan play. His music had changed after their conversation on the terrace, deeper somehow, more honest. He played fewer technical showpieces and more emotional works that seemed to tell stories without words. As the event began winding down near midnight, Mrs. Harper approached the piano during a break between songs. "Mr. Mercer," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "your playing has been the highlight of our evening. Would you consider one final piece, perhaps something special to close our night?" All eyes turned to Ethan. He scanned the room slowly, his gaze finally settling on Sophia, who was clearing champagne flutes from a table near the back. "I'd be happy to," he said, turning back to the keys. "This last piece is something I composed myself years ago. I haven't played it in a very long time." A murmur of interest rippled through the remaining guests. Sophia paused in her work, surprised. Lily had never mentioned that her brother composed music. When Ethan began to play, the room fell completely silent. The piece started simply, a gentle, questioning melody that gradually built in complexity and emotion. It wasn't classical like his earlier selections, nor was it modern pop. It existed in its own space, telling a story that seemed at once personal and universal. Sophia found herself moving closer to the piano, drawn by the rawness of the music. This wasn't the polished performance of earlier. This was Ethan sharing something deeply private. His eyes were closed, his body swaying slightly as his fingers danced across the keys. The melody shifted from questioning to searching, from darkness to a kind of tentative hope that made Sophia's throat tighten with emotion. As the final notes faded into silence, Sophia realized she wasn't the only one affected. Several guests were discreetly wiping away tears, and Mrs. Harper herself stood with one hand pressed to her heart. The applause that followed was different from earlier in the evening, less polite, more genuine. People approached Ethan not to network but to thank him, many of them mentioning how the music had touched them personally. Sophia returned to the kitchen to help with final cleanup, her mind still filled with Ethan's composition. What had inspired such a piece? And why had he chosen to share it tonight? An hour later, most of the staff had left, and Sophia was gathering her things to go home when Mrs. Chen appeared with an unusual smile on her face. "Mr. Mercer is asking for you," she said. "He's in the front hall." Sophia's heart jumped unexpectedly. "Did he say why?" "No, but after saving tonight's event, he could ask for the moon and I'd try to provide it." Mrs. Chen gave her a curious look. "You never explained how you know him." "We're just old acquaintances," Sophia said vaguely, untying her apron. "His sister and I were friends once." In the grand entrance hall, Ethan stood alone, his coat draped over one arm. The last guest had departed, leaving the mansion strangely quiet after the bustling event. "You asked for me?" Sophia said, suddenly aware of her rumpled uniform and tired appearance. Ethan nodded, looking almost nervous. "I wanted to thank you before I left." "Thank me?" "I should be thanking you." Mrs. Chen said the event raised twice what they expected for the Music Foundation. "Not for that," Ethan shook his head. "For remembering the person I used to be. For reminding me." Sophia didn't know what to say. This powerful man, who could buy and sell her entire neighborhood without noticing the cost, was thanking her as if she'd given him something precious. "That piece you played at the end," she said finally. "It was beautiful." "I didn't know you composed." A shadow passed over Ethan's face. "I wrote it after my father died. Music was the only way I could process what I was feeling." He paused. "I haven't played it since the day of his funeral." "Why tonight?" "Because tonight reminded me that there are parts of myself I've been neglecting." He looked at her intently. Important parts. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed one, breaking the moment. I should go, Sophia said reluctantly. It's late and I have class in the morning. Ethan nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. My personal number, he said, offering it to her. Not my assistant's, not my office, mine. Sophia took it carefully as if it might disappear. Why? Because I'd like to talk again, he said simply. About music. About life. About anything that isn't quarterly projections or market analysis. Sophia felt a smile spreading across her face. I'd like that too. As she left the mansion and began the long bus ride back to her tiny apartment, Sophia couldn't help wondering what had really happened tonight. She'd asked a distant acquaintance for a favor and somehow ended up reconnecting him with a forgotten piece of his soul. The business card in her pocket felt like a bridge between two worlds that weren't supposed to intersect. What would come of it she couldn't begin to guess. But as the city lights blurred past the bus window, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope for unexpected possibilities. 3 days passed before Sophia gathered the courage to use Ethan's number. Between her classes, shifts at the coffee shop, and studying for midterms, she'd barely had time to sleep, let alone think about calling a billionaire. But on Wednesday evening, as she sat alone in her apartment with a bowl of instant ramen, she found herself staring at the elegant business card. What would she even say? Hey, remember that charity gala where I served appetizers and you played piano? Want to chat? The very idea seemed ridiculous. Their worlds had briefly intersected, but now reality had reasserted itself. She was a struggling student who could barely make rent. He was featured on the cover of this month's Business Today. Still, something about their conversation on the terrace kept coming back to her. The way his mask had slipped, revealing the person beneath the success. The way he'd thanked her for remembering who he used to be. Before she could overthink it, Sophia picked up her phone and typed a simple message. It's Sophia. Just wanted to say thank you again for saving the gala. She hit send before she could change her mind, then immediately regretted it. It was 9:30 p.m. on a Wednesday. Someone like Ethan was probably in a business dinner, or flying to Tokyo, or doing whatever billionaires did on weeknights. To her surprise, her phone buzzed with a reply almost immediately. Sophia, I was hoping you'd reach out. Her heart beat a little faster as she typed, I wasn't sure if I should. You must be busy. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Always. But I've been thinking about that night. About the music. About our conversation. Sophia smiled at her phone, oddly touched that he was struggling to find the right words too. Your composition was beautiful. Have you written others? Dozens once upon a time. None in the past 5 years. Sophia frowned at the screen. 5 years seemed like such a long time to abandon something you loved. Why did you stop? There was a longer pause this time. Finally, building Mercer Tech became all-consuming. Music seemed frivolous by comparison. Is changing the world with technology more important than feeding your soul with music? Sophia typed, then immediately regretted the presumptuous question. Who was she to challenge how he lived his life? But Ethan's response surprised her. That's exactly the question I've been asking myself since the gala. Their conversation continued late into the night. Sophia curled up on her second-hand couch, wrapped in her mother's old quilt, texting with a man whose net worth was probably more than the entire apartment building she lived in. Yet somehow, the distance between their worlds seemed to shrink with each message. Ethan told her about the early days of his company, the excitement of creating something new, and how gradually the joy had been replaced by pressure and expectations. Sophia shared stories about her classes, her dreams of opening a small bakery someday, and her struggles to balance work and school. At some point, Ethan wrote, This is the longest conversation I've had in years that didn't involve quarterly projections or growth strategies. Is that sad or refreshing? Sophia replied, Both. When Sophia finally glanced at the time, it was after 1 a.m. I should sleep, she wrote reluctantly. Early class tomorrow, of course. Thank you for reaching out, Sophia. It meant more than you know. She hesitated, then typed, Maybe we could talk again sometime? His response came quickly. I'd like that very much. Sophia fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, though she couldn't quite explain why a simple conversation had left her feeling so seen. Over the next 2 weeks, Texting with Ethan became a surprisingly regular part of Sophia's life. They developed an easy rhythm. She'd send him photos of small, beautiful moments in her day. A perfect latte design she'd made at work, cherry blossoms along her walk to class, an elderly couple holding hands on the bus. He'd respond with thoughts about music he was rediscovering, or funny observations about the absurdities of corporate life. What began as occasional messages evolved into daily check-ins. Sophia would wake to find thoughtful texts he'd sent during his pre-dawn work hours. He'd receive her midday updates between meetings. They never discussed the vast differences in their circumstances. It hung unspoken between them, an acknowledgement that this friendship, or whatever it was, existed in a strange bubble outside their normal lives. Then, exactly 16 days after the gala, Sophia received a different kind of message from Ethan. "Are you free tomorrow evening? There's something I'd like to show you." Sophia stared at her phone, her pulse quickening. This was different from their text conversations. This was real life, where their differences would be impossible to ignore. "I have class until 6, she replied carefully. "I can send a car to pick you up afterward, if you're comfortable with that." Sophia bit her lip. Part of her wanted to refuse, to keep this unexpected connection in the safe realm of text messages. But another part, a stronger part, was curious. "Okay," she wrote. "Where are we going?" "It's a surprise. Casual clothes are fine." The next day, Sophia could barely concentrate in her business ethics class. She'd changed outfits 3 times that morning, finally settling on her nicest jeans and a simple blue sweater that her mother always said brought out her eyes. It was the best she could do without shopping for something new, which her budget definitely didn't allow. At exactly 6:15 p.m., as Sophia was leaving campus, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. A driver in a neat uniform stepped out and opened the door for her. "Miss Reyes?" he asked politely. "Mr. Mercer sent me." The drive took them out of the city center, past neighborhoods that grew increasingly exclusive. Sophia watched through the window as apartment buildings gave way to elegant homes, then to gated estates. When they finally turned into a long driveway bordered by perfectly manicured trees, Sophia's nervousness returned full force. Ethan's house, or mansion, more accurately, was modern and glass-walled, perched on a hillside with views of the entire city below. It wasn't ostentatiously large, but every detail screamed quiet wealth and impeccable taste. As the car stopped at the front entrance, Sophia saw Ethan waiting outside. He wore jeans and a simple gray sweater, more casual than she'd ever seen him, yet still somehow elegant. His face broke into a genuine smile when he saw her. "You came," he said as she stepped from the car, echoing her words from the gala. "I said I would," she replied, returning his smile despite her nerves. He led her into the house, through a minimalist foyer with soaring ceilings and past living spaces that looked like they belonged in architectural magazines. Sophia tried not to gawk, but it was difficult not to be intimidated by such perfection. "Your home is beautiful," she said, feeling hopelessly out of place. "It's a house," Ethan replied with a shrug. "I'm not sure it's a home. I'm barely here except to sleep." He guided her down a hallway to a set of double doors. "This is what I wanted to show you," he said, suddenly looking almost shy. "No one else has seen it." When he pushed open the doors, Sophia gasped. The room before them was a music studio unlike anything she'd ever seen. One wall was entirely glass overlooking the twinkling city lights. Another held a collection of instruments, guitars, violins, even a harp. But the centerpiece was a magnificent grand piano, gleaming black in the warm lighting. "I had it tuned yesterday," Ethan said, watching her reaction closely. "For the first time in years." Sophia stepped into the room, drawn to the piano. "It's beautiful." "I built this room when I first bought the house," Ethan explained, running his hand along the piano's edge. "Designed it specifically for the acoustics. And then, I never used it." He laughed softly, but there was pain behind it. 5 years of silence. "Until now?" Sophia asked. Ethan nodded, a mixture of determination and vulnerability in his eyes. "Playing at the gala." It woke something up. Something I'd forgotten. He moved to the piano bench and sat down, gesturing for Sophia to join him. "I've been coming in here every night since we started talking." Sophia sat beside him, careful to leave space between them. "Have you been playing your old compositions?" "No," Ethan said quietly. "I've been writing new ones." He placed his hands on the keys and began to play, The music that filled the room was nothing like the classical pieces from the gala, or even the personal composition he'd shared at the end of the night. This was something entirely different, hopeful and questioning and alive. Sophia watched his face as he played, struck by the transformation. The stern businessman was completely gone, replaced by an artist lost in creation. His eyes were closed, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. When the last notes faded, Ethan opened his eyes and looked at her. "That's the first new piece I've written in 5 years. I've been calling it Remembered." Sophia felt tears pricking at her eyes. "It's beautiful, Ethan. I wrote it after the gala," he said softly. "After talking with you." The weight of his words hung between them. Sophia didn't know how to respond, how to process what he seemed to be saying. "I've made a decision," Ethan continued, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of excitement. "I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations at Mercer Tech." Sophia blinked in surprise. "What? But it's your company, and it will continue to be. But I've appointed a new CEO to handle the daily management." His eyes were bright with certainty. "I'm creating a foundation instead, for music education in underfunded schools." "Ethan, that's incredible, but why?" He looked at her intently. "Because you reminded me that success isn't just about what you build or how much money you make. It's about remembering who you are in the process." Sophia was stunned. Had their conversations really impacted him so profoundly? "The foundation will need a program director," Ethan continued. "Someone who understands both worlds, the struggle and the privilege. Someone with business knowledge but also genuine compassion." Sophia's heart began to race as she realized what he was suggesting. "Ethan, I'm still in school. I don't have experience running anything like that." "You have something more important," he said. "You see people, really see them. You saw me when everyone else only saw my success." He took her hand gently, the first time they'd touched since the gala. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Just think about it." Sophia looked down at their hands, then back at his face, open, hopeful, and more alive than she'd seen it even when he was playing. In that moment, the vast differences between their worlds seemed less important than what they'd discovered in each other. "I'll think about it," she promised softly. 1 year later, the auditorium of Lincoln Heights Elementary School buzzed with excitement. Parents squeezed into 2 small chairs, phones held high to record the moment. Teachers stood along the walls, smiling proudly. On stage, 30 children aged 8 to 12 sat with perfect posture, their hands poised over piano keyboards. Sophia stood in the wings, clipboard in hand, her heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and pride. These were the first students of the Mercer Music Foundation's pilot program, children who had never had access to music education before. After 6 months of lessons, they were about to give their first public performance. "They looked terrified," a voice murmured in her ear. Sophia turned to find Ethan beside her, dressed casually in jeans and a dark blue button-down shirt. His hair was slightly longer than when they'd first reconnected, his face more relaxed. The stern businessman was still there when needed, but he appeared less and less frequently these days. "So do you," Sophia teased, though she felt the same butterflies. "These kids have worked so hard," Ethan said, watching the children with genuine concern. "I want everything to be perfect for them." Sophia touched his arm gently. "It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real." Ethan's expression softened. It had become their unofficial motto over the past year, a reminder that authentic expression mattered more than flawless execution, both in music and in life. "Ms. Sophia?" A small girl with braids and a missing front tooth tugged at Sophia's skirt. "I forgot how the second song starts." Sophia knelt down to eye level with the child. "Remember what we practiced, Zoe? If you forget, just take a deep breath and feel the music. It's already inside you." The little girl nodded solemnly, then threw her arms around Sophia's neck in a quick hug before running back to her place on stage. "You're incredible with them," Ethan said as Sophia straightened up. "They're incredible," she corrected. "Most of them practice on paper keyboards at home because they don't have real ones. Their dedication would put most adults to shame." A teacher stepped to the microphone on stage and the audience quieted. "It's time," Sophia whispered. "Ready to see what your crazy idea has accomplished?" Ethan's hand found hers and squeezed briefly. "Our crazy idea." As the teacher began introducing the program, Sophia's mind drifted back to the whirlwind of the past year. After that night in Ethan's music room, everything had changed, and not just for him. She had taken 2 weeks to consider his offer to direct the foundation, torn between excitement and fear. The position would mean leaving school, at least temporarily. It would mean stepping into a world she wasn't sure she belonged in. But it would also mean the chance to create something meaningful, to help children like she once was, kids with passion and potential but limited resources. When she finally said yes, Ethan had beamed with such genuine joy that any remaining doubts had vanished. The first months had been chaotic. Ethan's announcement that he was stepping back from Mercer Tech to focus on music education had created a media frenzy. Business publications questioned his sanity. Tech blogs speculated about hidden motives. Friends and colleagues expressed concern that he was having some sort of breakdown. Through it all, Ethan had remained steadfast, working alongside Sophia to build the foundation from the ground up. They'd visited dozens of schools, met with education experts, and designed a program that would bring quality music instruction to children in underserved communities. Along the way, their partnership had deepened into something neither of them had expected. They challenged each other, supported each other, and gradually broke down the barriers between their once separate worlds. Sophia had worried, at first, about how she would be perceived, the unknown young woman suddenly working closely with one of the country's most eligible bachelors. The speculation had been inevitable, with tabloids suggesting everything from a secret romance to Sophia being a calculating gold digger. But Ethan had never seemed bothered by the rumors, and eventually Sophia had learned to ignore them too. What existed between them was too real, too important to be tainted by gossip. Applause jolted Sophia back to the present. On stage, the children were beginning their first piece, a simple melody played in unison. A few wrong notes rang out, quickly corrected. One boy near the end looked frozen in panic until his teacher gently guided his hands to the correct keys. Sophia glanced at Ethan and found him watching the performance with such intensity, such open emotion that her heart swelled. This man, who once measured success in stock prices and market share, now found it in the determined face of a child discovering music for the first time. As the concert progressed, the children grew more confident. By the final piece, a specially arranged version of Ode to Joy that Ethan had helped adapt for beginners, they were playing with genuine passion, their small faces alight with accomplishment. When the last notes faded, the audience erupted in cheers and applause. Parents leapt to their feet. Teachers wiped away tears, and the children beamed with pride that transcended any technical imperfections in their performance. "That's our cue," Sophia whispered, nudging Ethan toward the stage. Together, they walked out to stand beside the young musicians. The children, recognizing Ethan from his visits to their classes, waved excitedly. The school principal stepped to the microphone. "We want to extend our deepest gratitude to the Mercer Music Foundation for making this program possible, and especially to Mr. Ethan Mercer and Ms. Sophia Reyes for their personal commitment to our students." More applause filled the auditorium. Sophia felt Ethan tense beside her. He was still uncomfortable with public praise, preferring to keep the focus on the children and teachers. The principal gestured to Ethan. "Mr. Mercer has agreed to play something for us today, alongside our students." This wasn't part of the program. Sophia turned to Ethan with wide eyes, but he was already nodding, a small smile playing on his lips. He stepped forward and sat at the main piano at the center of the stage. "I'd like to play something I composed recently," he said into the microphone, his voice quiet but clear. "It's called New Beginnings." As Ethan began to play, Sophia watched the children's faces. They listened with rapt attention, many of them leaning forward in their seats, studying his hands on the keys. The piece was beautiful, hopeful, and complex, yet accessible enough for young ears to appreciate. Halfway through, Ethan nodded to the students, and they joined in with a simple accompanying melody they must have practiced in secret. The combination was magical, the sophistication of Ethan's composition blending perfectly with the earnest simplicity of the child.